Happy Friday, everybody. Thank you for joining me. Yesterday was not yesterday, Wednesday. Was it Wednesday? Was Wednesday the day that my life? No, it wasn't even, Wednesday is the day that I woke up and realized that nothing in my world had changed and Georgia was exactly the same. So I guess the devastation really happened on Tuesday. I did not feel the devastation until midterm election results for the governor of Georgia came back, and I discovered that Wednesday morning. So 2 days ago, I was devastated, heartbroken, but I've had 2 days to process those feelings, and so I decided I would come here and process those feelings with you. So thanks for joining me. Today we're going to talk about, are politics bad for your health? Because some people wonder why, as a physician, I talk so much about politics. And, in a space like LinkedIn, it's almost like, is it even okay to talk about politics? Because this is, like almost like an extension of like the workplace, professionally speaking. But I'll give you my thoughts on that in a second, but just for those of you who don't know me, I am Dr. Kanika. I'm a board-certified internal medicine physician. I'm also a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant. And for those of you who wonder why I'm here, one of the things I discovered, or an epiphany I had, was like, the link between stress in the workplace and the increase in mental health and increase in chronic diseases is so strong. And that really compelled me to move beyond the exam room into the boardroom, into other spaces, really to advocate for more inclusive, equitable spaces in the workplaces and schools. We all have a role to play in increasing health equity and increasing healthcare outcomes. And for me, this is my thing. This is where I'm doing it. I'm doing it outside of the hospital because I would love to stop illness and disease before we get to the point where people are sick enough to need somebody like me. So that's who I am. And what we're going to talk about today, like I said, is, are politics bad for your health? Now, beyond the fact that it raised my blood pressure yesterday, not yesterday, but 2 days ago, beyond the fact that I was kind of depressed. I was like really sad. I was just in disbelief. It hit really hard. So the question is, why? Why does it matter who our governor is? Why does it matter who our senator is? And so this is not about me being a Black woman. It's not about me being a liberal. It's not about me being a Democrat. The reality is, when it comes to health care, the people in positions of authority, the people making the policies, really, really matter. And so that's what I care about. I don't care about your political affiliation. I don't care about any of those things. What I care about is the healthcare outcomes. I care about people. And so what I know as a physician, one of the things that was really driving me is that in this election, this was an election, especially in Georgia, that is really impacting the health of the people of Georgia. And so as a doctor, it's my place to speak up about this. As a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategist, it's my place to speak up about this. And so what's done is done, right? So why even talk about it? Well, I think we need to talk about it because there needs to be an understanding of what has happened and what is to come. So I think one of the biggest things, actually, what I was going to say is the biggest thing. I'm actually not going to say that's the biggest thing. I'm going to change that. And I think the lack of Medicaid expansion in the state of Georgia has been devastating. So many people don't even recognize the devastation that it's caused, but there are hospitals that are closing because without funding, they can't operate. And Governor Kemp made the decision to not take the funds. And what that means is that people will have less access to care. What that looks like in Atlanta is Wellstar Atlanta Medical Center. They closed. They closed their hospital, a hospital that served a huge swath of the population. And they're just gone. And so those patients are being like shipped, to different hospitals, that kind of thing. But it was a huge resource that is no longer there for the community. And there are people who are going to have less access to healthcare because of that decision. Now, in a city like Atlanta, you can probably find healthcare. There's no dearth of healthcare here in the city. But for those of you in rural America, there's absolutely a dearth of healthcare. There is a lack of healthcare. And so when you have a hospital that closes down in a rural area and then the nearest hospital isn't for another 30 miles, that's a problem. When you can't find a specialist, when you can't find a healthcare provider, that's a problem. And so when you have a governor who is not taking the funds because the thought is there's this honestly lack of concern for those who may need more assistance and who may have less. And so, but this affects all of us. Today is great. Today you have a wonderful job. You have insurance provided by your job. Tomorrow you get laid off. Maybe you cannot afford the COBRA insurance to provide a health extension, and perhaps you don't have a job, and it's hard. You find that it's hard to get a job, and before you know it, you are a person who is uninsured. You are a person who may need access to health care and may find that you don't have it. Or let's say you end up with a horrible illness, and because of that illness, you cannot work. And so you actually need resources to help you access healthcare. And healthcare is prohibitively expensive. And so there are people who have needs of Medicaid, and you may say, I'm not one of those, but you just never know. You really never know. And I really do believe that we are only as good as a community as the least of us. And so what this means is that just because I'm doing well doesn't matter if I'm surrounded by a lot of people who are struggling and can't make ends meet. And so we have to look out for one another, because success for another person is success for me, right? I feel like we're all interlinked. We're all together on a lot of these things. And and so when I see us making choices, political choices that are negatively impacting our health, it hurts. It hurts as a physician, because I know what this looks like. I know what this means. Let's talk about the big thing on the table, right? Let's talk about women's health. Let's talk about abortion. I prefer to say women's health because abortion is such a loaded term. It really comes down to women's health and women's rights to choose what decisions they make with their bodies. It's really to criminalize a woman's ability to choose the best thing for her in her life is problematic. And so this is not just about an abortion per se. It's about all the things that happen, all the downstream effects that happens when a woman does not have the ability to make choices for herself. So whether or not this is a pregnancy that may or may not endanger her life, and to get to that place where now it's a criminal act if we terminate a pregnancy that may endanger the mom's life, and so this mom is forced to risk her life, and that is a decision that she should be able to make, not a decision that the government makes for her. Let's take this to the natural conclusion. If you have women who get pregnant, are unable to provide for themselves or for the child, now you have a child to take care of. Now you can't go to school. Now it's harder to build your career. And so it puts you in a position where you're in a lower socioeconomic status because you aren't able to get the degree or get the education or get the training because you have this child to take care of. We are a society that does not provide safety nets or preschool or daycare for children. And so then as a mom, you're forced to choose between taking care of your child and working, but you need to work in order to take care of this child. And it becomes a catch-22. And so we have these policies in place that basically are putting women back in the dark ages, where if you get pregnant, this is it. And if you don't have support, so now you and your child struggle for the next 18 years as you struggle to make ends meet. It's just horrific. There's so many studies and there's so much out there that shows what happens to women in terms of career mobility, in terms of socioeconomic status, especially if you have a child that you don't have support for and you don't have help with in order to better yourself and make better life decisions for yourself. So then it negatively impacts the health of the woman, but it also negatively impacts the health of her child who is going to be born into circumstances where they have limited resources. And so the cycle repeats itself. And so we see children coming in with conditions that could have been prevented, conditions that are associated with poverty. And we see women who are limited in their abilities to do better for themselves and to do better for their families. I think what really hit yesterday for me was when I looked at the breakdown. Somebody sent me the breakdown of voters for Stacey versus Brian Kemp, and I was really proud of the Black women. We showed up and we showed out for Stacey. We supported her. I like to think not because she's a Black woman, but because she is the best candidate. She was the best candidate for the state of Georgia for women. Black men showed up, they showed out, they supported Stacey Abrams, and Hispanic men and women, it was about 50-50, Stacey Abrams and Brian Kemp. But what was really mind-blowing to me was when I looked at white men and white women. Now, I think white men, about 23% or so supported Stacey Abrams, and the vast majority supported Brian Kemp. I can't say I'm surprised, right? I wasn't really expecting one way or the other for white men to show up and to support a Black woman, no matter how talented she was or is. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation, but it's something that I see play out in the workplace all day, every day. So this is, of course, no different. But to see white women, I think it was about 25% voted for Stacey Abrams. The other 75% voted for Kemp. Somewhere around there, it may have been like 27%, 77%, like that kind of thing being the split. Or like 73%, 27%. The issue here is, holy crap, I expected women to show up because of women's rights, because a lot of us are mothers, because that was so unexpected. I never thought that women would support a man who's taking away their rights, their personal rights. It's like going back to the dark ages for me. And so the fact that white women would choose to support a white man who is literally taking away their reproductive rights, their autonomy, their freedoms, over a Black woman who is more than qualified, I would say overqualified for the job, and would make sure that you and your children are provided for, that you and your families have opportunities, that you have access. I was just blown away. And so I think what hit me really hard about that percentage was two things. One, the fact that I just felt as a woman in solidarity with other women. I expected the women of Georgia to show up, and for this to not be about Black or white, for this not to be about ethnicity, like I said, Black or white, and for this to not be about Democrats versus Republicans. I really expected it just to be about women standing up and saying, this is my body. You don't control my body. This is my life. These are my rights, and you will not take those rights. I expected women to come together in solidarity across party lines, across race, and for this to be a referendum to tell men that you don't control our bodies. I guess I was naive. I was clearly naive. But so moving beyond just the connectivity we have as women and looking at the fact that was it that they as women could not get behind her because she was a Black woman? Was that the issue? I just wonder. I wonder if it had been a white man with her same agenda, could white women and white men have gotten behind her? And even if the white men still said no, would the white women have gotten behind the white man if he had been a Democrat supporting women's rights? And was it the fact that she's a Black woman that made them not able to see her as the person who could be their leader? I just wonder. And then there are some other things that are really difficult to say, but I feel like need to be said. If she had been a different Black woman, if she had been lighter skinned, if she had been thinner, if she'd had thinner lips, if she had longer, straighter hair, I mean, if she were more white adjacent, would she have been more palatable to white women, to the white community? I wonder if there are those who looked at her and saw in her historically and reminiscent of women of her type or of her stereotype who would have been the person who was taking care of the babies, who would have been, there's just certain words I'm just not going to use because they're just not words I will use in the same sentence as Stacey Abrams' name. But you know what I'm talking about. There's a certain stereotype that we have decided that Black women should fit. And she was more appropriate for the stereotype of a Black woman who was providing care for white families, not one who they felt could lead their families. And I just wonder, if those things had been different, could white women have gotten behind her? And so I can't help but, with the biases, the inherent biases that we have, and Black people, we understand this, the light skin, the dark skin, the big lips, the thin lips, the noses, like all these things, right? The things that many people have tried for decades and centuries to try to de-accentuate traits that have been attributed to Black people and to accentuate traits that have been attributed to white people because it makes you more palatable. That's what we do in the workplace when it comes to hair. So this is something we've always been doing. And Stacey didn't try to make herself more palatable. Stacey came as her authentic self, as her badass self, as her brilliant self. And Georgians, we weren't ready. White women weren't ready. And I felt betrayed. I felt heartbroken. Working in this space, I am a true believer that we are all in this together. And race and ethnicity and all those things that we make matter so much are like the least important part of like who we are as humans. And so to see it broken down in that demographic, it was just heartbreaking. If Stacey had lost with a different demographic breakdown, it would have been easier to swallow. She just lost. But when I saw that white women did not show up, especially in this midterm, especially with our health, our bodies on the line, if we can't all get together as women behind that, the numbers just made no sense. Because based on those numbers, that means that there are women in that group who voted against Stacey, who knew that they were also voting against their best interest, and they did it anyway. And as a really wise friend of mine said, because I'm wondering, like, why would they do this? And she said they were voting for whiteness. They were voting to preserve whiteness. That is what they were doing, and that is what they did, even to the detriment of themselves. And so what do? I this is a discussion for another time because I want to keep this relatively short. But forever, white people have voted against their best interests. They've made policies against their best interests if it meant that they were somehow going to harm black people, if it meant that if they thought that there was a chance of a black person benefiting from it or the black population benefiting from it, they would vote against their own self-interest. And we see that happen time and time and time again. Even with Obamacare, white people in rural America who would have benefited from Obamacare, who greatly benefit, and still voted against him, and thus voting against themselves. And we saw that play out there, but I wasn't ready. I had a certain belief in women, in us, that transcended race, that transcended, affiliations, and I was wrong. So I'm working through that. And the work continues, right? The work continues. In fact, there's more work now to be done than if Stacey Abrams had gotten into office. Because from a health equity standpoint, taking away women's rights and women's rights to choose, and it's a slippery slope when it comes to our health. And then when you take in the fact that Brian Kemp clearly does not care about lack of healthcare access, it's all intertwined. So are politics bad for your health? Yeah, they are. And if you don't realize that politics directly affect your health, they affect your healthcare access, they affect the laws that govern what we can and cannot do when it comes to providing you with healthcare. Think about the laws that politicians pass affect our environment. They affect our so when you think about Flint, Michigan, and you think about the water, right? These were politicians, these were people in office, these were policies put into place that allowed this to happen, that led to pollution, that led to drinking water, that led to illness. It's all interconnected. And I guess I feel like somehow I failed in maybe drawing those connections so that people could see these connections exist, and these are some of the things you should be thinking about. But hey, I'm not going anywhere. I'm just starting, and so I will keep, trying to make a difference. I will keep trying to save lives, whether it's in the hospital at the bedside or whether it's in a corporate boardroom. I will continue to do the best I can, whether it's in schools with teachers and administrators, because everything we do is interconnected. We're all dependent on one another. And so, I wanted to come, and I needed to get this out there. And I know there are those of you who worked your asses off on this campaign. You really, really worked hard. And I know that it's been heartbreaking for some people to see all of the work they put in, especially given your heart for people. And I just want to encourage you that your work has not been in vain. Our work is not in vain, that we will continue to do the work. We will continue to push, and you don't always see the fruit of your labors immediately. And we are definitely in a society that we like immediate gratification, but it doesn't always work that way. So we may not have been successful this time. We have 4 more years with Governor Kemp, and I just truly, honestly believe that, we will continue to do the work that we're doing. We will support those who need support as they need it. And every single day in the work that we do and the way we show up for people, that doesn't change. There have always been people working to make the world better for others, and we will continue to do that. You will continue to do that. And so this is not a failure. It was a setback, but not a failure. And so be encouraged. Keep going out there doing the good work, because you matter. The work you do matters. So with that, I'm going to head out of here. I hope you guys have a happy Friday. Enjoy your weekend, and I'll see you next week. So, and for those of you who don't know me, again, just to let you know, Dr. Kanika, board certified internal medicine physician. Sorry, I'm trying to pull this thing up. Board certified internal medicine physician. I'm also a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant. And so, once again, the link between stress in the workplace and the increase in mental health disease and chronic diseases really led me to move beyond the exam room, out into these spaces where I'm an advocate for creating inclusive, equitable spaces in the workplaces and schools. So thanks for joining me. I hope I gave you something to think about. And hey, if you want to reach out to me, you can either follow me on like all the social media platforms at Dr. Kanika MD. And then you can also shoot me an email at info@drkanikamd.com. And of course, if you're on LinkedIn, I'd love to connect with you, especially if you're doing this work. All right, you guys take care.